No. Ok. Non mi lo sta prendendo. It's damn hot. Ci dovrei essere. Devo togliere il volume. Ok. Welcome back, fellow listener and followers. We are here again for another 2 chapter of Quag, the first novel of Dungeons and Dragons, in the setting of Grey Oak. Last time we saw our 7 heroes, our company of 7 heroes, the swordsman Milo Yegon, the wereboar berserker Nail Fangtooth, the cleric Divdine, the bard Wiremuck, the rogue elf Ingrigr, the sword maiden Yveli, and the lizardman Gult escape from an army of evil shadows and begin the searching for Lycius, the golden dragon. They are searching Lycius for obtaining an hand and help against an unknown enemy. So, last time on the mountain, now we continue. The last time they found a contact with Lycius, and then chapter 11 is titled Lycius the Golden. I have a lot. Okay. It's hot today. So, chapter 11, Lycius the Golden. The silence abiding in the forest was daunting. Milo found himself glancing over his shoulder now and then, not because he heard any sound, but rather because he heard nothing. This was the same feeling that had gripped him in the inn at the start of this worldwide adventure. That bee was under covert observation. Okay. Perhaps some distant kin of Ingrid patrolled these ways, keeping out of sight. But it was strange that no bird called within the dark green fastness, that the party caught no sight, heard no sound of any beast. There was no way of telling the hour, and so zigzag was the path the elf followed, that Milo could not be sure whether they still headed south or west. They did mount rises separating one valley from another. From these ridges, all he could see was the loom of the cloud-veiled mountains behind, with other dark and dreary-looking peaks massing ahead. At length they emerged from the trees into a section where the rogue terrain was of congealed lava, long hardened, yet retaining sharp edges. This brought their progress to a crawl, making it necessary to constantly watch for the safety of their own footing and that of their animals. Above them, at last, was the break in the mountainside through which, ages ago, this once molten flood had found a path. Ingrid waved to that opening in the rock wall and spoke to Nail. "It is time to lose Afrita," the pseudo-dragon of Nail. "We stand at the outer edge of Lycius' own domain. Beyond this point, we do not dare to go without invitation." "So?" The berserker raised his hand to the pseudo-dragon nested within the upturned collar of his hide cloak. "Well enough." Afrita uncoiled, crawled out upon his palm, her wings shimmering in the air as she exercised them. This time she seemed too eager to even look at the man she had chosen to companion. Later she took off in a glide. Then her wings whirred swiftly as she beat her way up toward that break in the mountainside. So swiftly did she go that she vanished, as if blown afar by some act of magic. We wait. Ingrid moved out among their ponies, unfastening the feedbacks. Milo and Weimar joined him, measuring out handsful of corn, which the small beasts greeted with eager whinnies. The horses munched the grain and were watered from bags not nearly as plump as they had been earlier. The riders rationed themselves to a small portion of water, well below the rim of a cup Ingrid filled and passed from hand to hand. Gyult slumped in the saddle of his mount. Milo guessed that had the lizardman dismounted, it could well be that he could not have won aloft again. His cowled head hung forward, so that his snout nearly touched his breast, but, as usual, he uttered no complaint. Niall strode back and forth. It was never easy for one of his mixed nature to wait patiently. As he paced, he turned his head ever upward, seeking a glimpse of Afrita returning. Divdine set his back to a jutting rock. He began to pass his prayer beads through the fingers of one hand, while the other rested on the breast of his robe, guarding what secrets he carried there in the inner pockets. A man raised and trained in precincts of one of the great temple abbeys will find consorting with the dragonful heart. Those of the scaled and wicked kind own no gods or demon-seater. Their own judgment of right or wrong was not that of mankind, and their actions could not be either foreseen or measured by those whom they considered lesser beings. The Golden Dragon himself was known to have always favored the road of law. Lesser beings of his race consorted openly with chaos, giving aid capriciously to dark adepts. The stories concerning Lycius as stated that when he withdrew from the world, he had finally fiercely bade men go their own heedless ways and expect no more commerce with him. That he would break with his word now, even though they had indeed come to his private nest place. How dared they count on any favorable reception? Milo fingered the bracelet that bound him to both a mad and seemingly endless quest, finding little good in such talks. If this be indeed Lycius' nest, Evelyn's voice was thoughtful as she came to stand beside the swordsman. Why should they hearken to us? That same question I have been asking myself, Milo answered. He surveyed the jagged, broken top of the heights. Unlike the mountain of the past, here was no cloud to conceal any part of those forbidding pinnacles cutting into the dull sky. In the west, behind the peaks, a sullen, dire, blood-red band across the heavens proclaimed the hour of sundown. The girl raised her arm, her attention for the band about her wrist. If we play a game, swordsman, then it is a doom-darkened one. This wizard talk of things not of our world, using the very fact of our existence to weave some spell. She shook her head slowly. Though there are always new things, both good and ill, waiting to be learned. What she might have added was cut off by a harsh cry from Niall. The berserker came to a halt, facing up a slope, his thick, muscled arm flung out in greeting and to serve as a perch for Afrita. The pseudo-dragon settled, her claws clicking on his mail as she climbed to his shoulder and there fell to hissing, her head bobbing almost as fast as her wings moved in the air. Niall's eyes gleamed bright beneath the overhang of his helm. "We can go," he reported. Ingrid nodded and set about, with the others' help, to get their train in order. All this time Niall took the lead, Afrita, plainly excited to a high pitch, sometimes sitting on his shoulder, sometimes whirring aloft for short flights, impatient at the careful plodding of those who must walk on 2 feet or 4. The lava flow formed the most tricky of roads. All but Guild dismounted, sometimes needing to turn back and lead a second or a third of their beasts across some very broken strip. As they made that very slow climb, the light faded more and more from the sky. Dusk closed in too rapidly. True twilight had fallen when they reached at the last the lip of the break through which that then molten lava had flowed. Here they halted, looking down into the domain of Leches. A crater formed an irregular cup, but the fires that had burst loose from the earth's core at this point had long since died. There was the gleam of water in the deepest part of the center, and around that a rank growth of shrub and grass, not autumn browned but still solidly green. Water birds, looking hardly larger than Afrita from this distance, wheeled above the small lake, settled on it, took on again as whim directed. Save for them, no other life could be sighted. Once more Afrita cried and leaped into the air, circling Niall's head, then winging out, not toward the downward descent that ended at the lakeside, but rather along the rim of the crater to the left. Divdine rumbled in his robe to produce a ball of dull silver, about which he ringed the prayer bed string. The dullness of the globe vanished, rays of light which revealed beams of a full moon sped forth. He pushed by Niall and went slowly, holding his strange torch closer to the ground so that, by its pale, steady light, they could see any obstacle. Their pace now became little more than a crawl. At once Divdine halted. What his improvised torch showed them was another cleft in the rock, and as he threw himself belly down, lowering the globe by a coil of his bed string, they could sight below a level of puff angling over the ridge, down into the now shadowed crater. Ingrid swung over, went down on one knee, peering at the puff. When the elf's white face was lifted into the stronger glow of the globe, he was already speaking. "This is a game trail of sorts. I will say that if we lose the animals, they will drift down for feed and water. There they will abide unstraying." Now he spoke once more directly to Niall, about whose head Afrita was buzzing and darting impatiently. "What we seek is here above?" "Yes," rumbled the berserker. Even the globe could not continue to aid them through the steadily growing dark. To force their mounts and the ponies further on such a raw way could well mean a broken leg, a snapped hoof, or injuries even Divdine with all his skill could not heal. So they followed Ingrid's suggestion, stripping the weary mounts and the pack ponies, urging them carefully down into the cut and giving them their heads. Straightway horses whinnied. Ponies snickered as they trotted free to where water and grazing waited. Piling most of their gear among the rocks, the party made ready to forge ahead. Guild, perhaps because he had ridden through most of their day's travel, seemed able to keep his feet, but Wymark, without a word, moved up close enough to the lizardmen to lend a hand if aid should become necessary. Even though they did not now have to seek the best way for the beasts, their advance was slow. But at last they came to a narrow seam, turning inward along the crater wall. Down this they crept step by cautious step, their left hands gripping whatever hold they could find. Then Divdine moved out upon a ledge and stood, globe held high, to light them down. Even as the ledge backed by the cave had been their refuge in the mountain, so did this one also furnish a threshold for a great arch of rock. It might have been that their arrival before that dark hole was a signal. The restricted light of Divdine's torch was swallowed up in a blaze of radiance, feverishly red, dyeing all their faces. Out of that crimson flood came not a voice, but a thought which pierced minds with the same clarity as a shout might have reached their ears. A thought so strong that to receive and understand it brought a feeling of pain. Man and elf were a small kin, aye, and scared on one of the water. Come you in, you who have dared disturb my quiet. Go in, they did. Milo was sure they could not have withstood the will behind that mind voice, even had they so wished. About them washed the scarlet light, forming mist through which they could move, yet could not see. Out of habit and instinct, Milo's mittened hand rested on his sword. He unconsciously brought up his battered shield. The dragonkind were legend, had been legend for generations. Deep in him there was a bomb of those same legends. The red mist swirled, puffed, arose as one would draw upward a curtain. Under their boots was no longer grey rock, rather a patterned flooring of glinting crystals, perhaps even of gems, set in incomprehensible designs. Red, all shades of red and yellows, and the white of eyes were those bits of brilliance, but only for a moment did Milo see and wonder at them. For now the mist moved high to disclose the master of this nest. Confronting them was another ledge, this one with a rim to hold back what it contained. Though here and there some of that shifting substance had cascaded to the floor, sent spinning by movements of great limbs. What formed that bedding, if bedding it might be termed, was lumps and pieces of gold, some of it coins so old that their inscriptions were long since worn away. Bright and gleaming as that metal was, the creature who used it as the softest of beds was more resplendent. Afrita was indeed a miniature copy of this huge and ancient kinsman, but like the Garigol of the haze, Lys's size was such as to reduce all facing him to the insignificance of small children. His body scales were larger than Nail's hand, and over the basic gold of their coloring gem lights rippled steadily as the water of a pool might be stirred by a summer breeze. Mighty wings were folded, and the snouted head was high, held in a curious, near-human way by the resting of the fanged jaw on a taloned paw folded in upon itself like a fist. The elbow of that huge limb supported in turn by the rim of the gold-filled nest. The great eyes were still half-lidded, as if their arrival had disturbed its slumber. No man could read any expression on the face. Then the mighty tail stirred, sending a fresh shower of gold thudding out into the gem-set floor. I am Licious. There was a supreme confidence in that toe which overbore all defenses. Struck straight into their minds. Why come you here to trouble me in the peace I have chosen? He regarded them drowsily, and then, too, Milo had expected that one of the others, the cleric who dealt in magic, the elf whose blood was akin to the land itself, or even Nail, who companioned with Afrita, will be set to answer that half challenge. It was at the swordsman that question had been aimed. We lie under Aegeus, Milo verbalized, because that was more natural for him. We seek, then he felt silent, for it seemed to him that some invisible projection from Licious reached deep into his mind, seeking, sorting, and he could raise no defense against that invasion, try as he might. Milo was not even aware that his shield had clung to the floor, that his hands pressed against his forehead. This was a frightening thing, part of it a sickening revulsion, a feeling of rape within the very core of his mind. So, invasion ceased, withdrew. Lichess reared his head higher, his eyes fully opened now, so that their slit pupils were visible. That clawed paw on which he had rested his jaw made a gesture. About them the wall of the cave nest trembled. The mountain wall itself quivered in answer to Lich's toe demand. Though Milo sensed force, aimed not at him, but elsewhere, thrusting into dimensions beyond the comprehension of those who knew not the talent. A ball of scarlet haze rolled from overhead, began to spin. Though it made him increasingly sick and dizzy to watch its gyrations, Milo found that he could not ram his eyes from it. As it spun, its substance thickened and then flattened. The ball became a flat surface, steadying vertically above the floor at Milo's shoulder height. On that disk arose configurations. The red faded to the grey of the mountain lands. Lapping the wall of rock was now an expanse of yellow-grey, without any features, just a billowing surface. "The sea of dust," Ingrid said. Lichess did not glance in the direction of the elf. Rather, he leaned his great head forward, staring intently at the miniature landscape, which ever changed, grew more distinct. Mountains lay to the right. The sea stretched on over 3/4 of the rest of the disk. Now, at the extreme left, within the dust land, there arose a dark shadow, irregular like a blot of ink dropped from the pen of a scribe, to spread across a yet unlettered parchment. The stain became fixed on the very edge of the disk. Lich's head dropped still more, until his great snout nearly touched that blot. Milo thought that he saw the dragon's wide nostrils expand a little as if he were sniffing. Then once more that tall voice reached out for the swordsman. "Stretch forth your right hand, man." Obediently, he swung his palm up and out, not allowing his flesh to touch the miniature landscape. On his thumb, the oblong of the ring began to glow. The minute red lines and dots on it awoke into a life of their own. "You carry your own guide," Lichess announced. "Loosen your hand, man. Now." So emphatic was that order that Milo obeyed. He tried to allow his hand to go limp where it hung above the miniature mountains, walling the pictured sea. His flesh met and rested upon some invisible support in the air. Then, by no will of his, it moved from right to left, slowly, inexorably, while on the ring the lines and dots waved and waned. Toward the blot on the left his hand swung. The compulsion that held him tugged him into taking one step forward and then another. His index finger, close to the thumb, clung tightly, one length of flesh near wedded to the other. Now that finger pointed straight to the blot. "There is your goal." Lichess sank back to his former indolent position. Below Milo's outstretched hand the disk spun furiously. Bits of mist from which it had been fashioned breaking off, the clear-cut picture of the land disappearing. "The sea of dust," Ingrid mused. "No man or elf has dared dead and returned." "You have seen where lies that which you will find." Lich's tone conveyed no emotion. "What you do with this knowledge is your own affair." Perhaps because the golden dragon had used him to point out their path, and he was beginning to be irked at being ununderstood, Milo dared to raise another question. How far must we go, Dragon Lord?" And Lichess shifted on his bed of gold. There was a rippling of color across his scales. From him, to catch in their minds, flowed a warning spark of the ancient lord's irritation. Man, and such other of you as walk on 2 feet, ride upon four measure your own distance. To the end of your strength your road will stretch. I have seen in your memories what this wizard would have you do. To his small mind the logic is correct, but he has his boundaries in all those scraps of the old learning he clutches to him and seeks to store in his limited memory. This I believe. What you seek now lies at the core of the sea of dust. It is alien, and even I cannot fathom what it hides. Though the blood kind of my species have in their time passed from world to world in dreams or waking, when they were foolishly young, nearly still damp from the egg and filled with the impetuosity of an unlearned spawn. You will dare the sea, and what haunts it. In it are the younger brothers such as Rokna, who in the past went haunting there. The brass dragon! Neil broke out, and Afruta hissed, thrusting her head into hiding beneath the collar of his cloak. Something close to amusement of a distant and alien kind could be sensed in Lich's answer. So, that one is still making trouble? It has been many span of years since he played games with men and answered when he so willed the calling of the Lords of Chaos. I think none now live who will dare so to call now, but once he made the sea of dust his own. Now, Lich settled down farther in his strange bed, burrowing his limbs into the loose gold. I weary of you, man, elf, and all the rest. There is nothing new in your species to amuse me. Since I have answered your questions, I bid you go. Milo found himself turning, without willing that action, so that the others were also doing so. Already the red mist fell in thick rolls to curtain off the reluctant host. As the swordsman drew away, he looked back over his shoulder. Not only had the mist now completely veiled the leashes, but it was fading into shadows. As they came out on the ledge above the crater valley, there was nothing left behind them but impenetrable dark. They descended, burdening themselves with the packs and gear they had stripped from the horses, to where the animals grazed about the lake. The tall walls of the crater cut off those mountain winds that oft lashed them, and it was actually warmer than it had been at any time since they had set forth from Grey Oak. They did not need the fire this night for ease of temperature, yet they crowded to it as a symbol of a world they understood, and an anchorage against danger. Though Lich's domain held no threat of chaos, the dangers of the outer dark could not venture so close to one who had been ever triumphant over the magic of evil. The sea of dust! Nail had eaten his portion of their journey food, and now sat, his back against a boulder, his heavy legs outspread. Afruta perched upon one of his knees, so that now and then he drew a caressing finger down her spiked backbone. I have heard many tales of it, but all tiered and forehand, or even still further removed. Do any of you know more? Ingrid threw a twist of tall grass to feed the fire. Sparks knew upward. I have seen it, he stated flatly, their attention centered upon the elf. When he did not continue, Nail prompted impatiently. You have seen it? Well, then, what manner of country is it? It is, the elf replied somberly, exactly what men call it. As the seas that are known to us are filled with water, which is never quiet, pulled hither and yon by tides, driven by storm winds, breaking in ceaseless waves to eat away at the land, so exists the sea of dust. It may not have its tides, but it has its winds, to encase a traveller in clothes of grit, until he is totally lost. He sinks into it, to be swallowed up as water may swallow a man who cannot swim. How deep its layers are, no one knows. There was once a race who made it their own. They built strange ships, not like those that go upon the oceans, but flat of bottom, with runners extending some distance fore and aft, wide and webbed to hold them on the surface. They raised sails to the ever-blowing winds and coasted thus. Now, after a heavy storm, it is said that sometimes a wreck of one of their ancient ships may be seen jutting out of the wind-driven dust. What became of them, no man of our age knows. But to venture out into those quicksand afoot is to sink. Niall hunched forward a little, his hands made into fists resting upon his knees. You speak of webbed runners to support a ship, he mused, and you warn of men sinking straightway into this treacherous stuff. But what if men who will try such a journey could also use footwebs, spreading as it were the weight of their bodies over a wider expanse? In the frozen lands, men walk so upon the surface of soft snow in winter, where without such support they will flounder into drifts. Snow shows. Milo's outer memory worked into life for an instant. He looked at the elf. Could such work, do you think? Ingrid shrugged. We can but try. It sounded none too sure. I have not heard of such before. But I see no way we can venture without some aid into that shifting, unsolid country. We cannot take the beasts with us. Only what we ourselves can carry will provide our sustenance there. Milo thought of the map Lichess had created. How far away was the center? The golden dragon had refused even to guess the distance. As he rolled himself into his cloak, it was with a dampened spirit. What a man could do he was ready and willing to try, but there comes a time when even strength and will can be challenged, run to the uttermost, with failure the final sum of all. End of chapter 11. Okay, a brief intermission. I am the water. Damn. Better than nothing. Okay. Chapter 12. The Sea of Dust. They chose to camp sheltered by screwed trees. There they slumped wearily for a space to nurse aching feet, shoulders galled by pucks. However, at this end of the day's laborious march, they did at last look out upon that feared trap, the sea of restless dust. It was no more level than the wind-disturbed ocean. Where ocean waves roll, here dunes mounded and gave off a haze of grit from their rounded crests at the slightest breath of breeze. Farther out, whirling pillars of dust devils danced, rose and fell, skittered across a rippling surface, demons of the waste. Looking out into and over that desolation, Milo longed to turn his back upon it. A man could fight against upraised weapons. He might even summon up reserves of courage to front demonic threat or alien, monstrous enemies produced from a sorcerous nightmare. But this land itself was against humankind. Yet there was no easing of the Gaia's compulsion that had drawn them hither. Scusate. Whether or not they were committed to the penetration of what lay ahead, with no sure knowledge of any trail. For how could one mark a trail when there was a constant shifting of dunes, the haze of driven dust? Or how long they must fight for survival before they reached their goal? With the next day's dawning, they began to fashion their only hope for going farther. Ingrid chose the material, and he did it as though he loathed the task. As with all the elfenkind and the destruction, even of these crooked and spindling scrub trees that grew on the lip of the sea, was a thing against his innermost nature. They selected with care the most pliable of lengths he gave them, soaking them in a pool of water that was murky with dust puffed from the south, giving the turgid water a yellow velvet surface. Once they were thoroughly soaked, Nail used his strength to bend the chosen pieces and hold them while they were lashed together. The berserker also sacrificed a goodly portion of his leather cloak to be slit into narrow tongues to lace across the resulting egg-shaped sand shoes. Then, into that netting, the rest interwove roots, twisting in this material until the whole took on a solid appearance. Edging his boots carefully into tongues, Milo was the first to try the clumsy-looking footgear, venturing out to the drear yellow-brown waste of dust. The surface gave under his weight, and some of the particles oozed over the edges of his footgear, but though he had to proceed with a spraddle-legged walk, he sank no farther. In the end, they decided they had found the answer to one of the perils of the sea. They discarded all the gear that they dared, taking only their weapons, a measure of their journey's supplies, and the water skin for each. Once they had filled those from the pool, filtering the contents through a cloth evilly provided, Gyult waded into the water, which washed no higher than his waist, and squatted down in the liquid until only his snout could be seen. He had taken his cloak with him, letting it soak up in its tow fabric as much of the liquid as possible. Alone of the company, he refused to be fitted with the sand shoes. His own webbed feet, he insisted, would accommodate him on the treacherous surface, as they did in the ooze of his home swamps. Last night they had completed those shoes, and now it was morning once more. For the first time, and when they wished it the least, the clouds that had hung over them for much of their journey cleared. Sun arose to glare down upon the shifting surface of the grey-brown sea. Like Gyult, they went cloaked, even with hoods pulled over their helmets to shield them from dust, powder, and grit. Their progress was very slow, as they waddled awkwardly on, fighting to balance on the clumsy web shoes. Gyult quickly became a stumbling pillar of dust as it clung to his wet cloak. But he had been right in that. His own webbed feet proved better able to walk here than on the hard stone of the mountain's bones. Milo took the lead. He held a stone stretched out so that he could see the ring that leeches had told them was a guide. Though the lines and dots upon it meant no more to him than they had ever done, he saw for the first time that there was a glow at the base of the stones. As they advanced, that glow crept slowly up the green surface. It had begun near the end of one of the lines, and Milo wanting to test the efficiency of this strange and to him improbable guide, angled a little away from a straightforward line. The glow dimmed. He was right. As he swung back again, the glow deepened, fastened upon the line directly. The swordsman remembered tales of the voyagers who had dared this vast, with wind-driven, dust-skimming ships. Could the lines mark the path their ships had taken? Since he could do no better, he kept to what he read in the ring, seeking each time the glow wavered to move right or left back to the line. At the fifth such change in the line of march, Niall demanded angrily what he was trying to do, whereout their strand moving higher and tighter like some mindless heart beetle. But on Miles pointing out the direction of the ring lines, the berserker subsided with a grunt. Ingrid and Divine gave assent with nods. The elf added that the line Milo had chosen, merely by chance, did indeed run toward that portion of the sea where Alicia's map had produced in miniature the seat of the evil they sought. Their pace continued necessarily slow. The effort required to raise a foot from the sucking embrace of the dust and to place it had tried muscles that ordinary walking did not use. While the sun's glare centered the heat on them, Milo called the hulls closer and closer together, and was glad to see that none of them, even Gult, took more than a sip or two from their supply of water. The question that lay at the back of all their minds was how long a trail might stretch before them. Added to that was the uncertainty of their finding more water even at the end. To if their enemy had this, or its headquarters there, Milo reasoned, there must exist some source of food and water. He called a longer halt at midday, for he noticed that Gult, though as usual the lizardman offered no protest, was wavering. The heat had long since sucked all moisture from its dust-burdened cloak. Now it must be drying his skin in turn. Yet, if they gave him freely from their own containers of water, it might mean death for them all. Two high-hipped dunes quite close together provided a measure of protection from the air that was filled with powder and dust. It found a way into their mouths, clogged their nostrils, irritated their eyes. Creeping between the hillocks, Milo and Wymark shed their cloaks and battened them down with hands full of grit, to form a roof under which the party lay close together, striving to shut out the misery of the day, their shoes under them to support their bodies. To have attempted this journey by day, Milo decided, was folly. They should have started at night, when at least the sun would have been eliminated from their list of torments. Divine rose the hymn some time later. The cleric's face was a smear of dust, making a grotesque mask. But the trouble in his eyes was plain to read. "Gult, he will die," he stated bluntly, pointing to where the lizardman lay a little apart from the others, as he always did. Iveli now knelt beside him, only partly visible in the dusk, for it was close to night. The thick cloak had been pulled aside from the skeleton body, while the battle-maid wiped the arch of the alien's chest with a cloth. When she up-tipped one of the water bags and wet the cloth, Milo would have protested, but his words were never uttered. Instead, he crept over to her side. Gult's eyes were shut. His knotted mouth hung open a fraction, dark tongue tip exposed. Iveli dribbled a little of the water into his mouth, then set aside the bag, to once more rub the lizardman's chest with her dampened cloth. She glanced up at Milo. "This does a little good." Her voice sounded harsh, as if the dust had got into her throat. To quote her words, "He is dying." "So he dies." Niall sat up. He did not even turn his head to view the girl's effort at rousing the lizardman. "The world will be the sweeter with one less snakeskin in it." "One expects nothing from the boar but blind rage and little talk." She spat, as if to clear her mouth of both the words and the dust. "But think of this, bold warrior. evilly lifted the girl's limp wrist, exposing the bracelet. 7 of us bear this. Do you not speculate that if we are so tired, the fate of one is in the end entwined with the fate of the rest? I know not what magic has bound us on this wheel of companioned adventure, but I should not care to take the chance of losing any one of you, not because we are truly sworn companions or shieldmates, but because together we may be mightier than we are separately. Look about you, berserker. Is this not seemingly an ill-assorted company? We have an elf, and the elfin kin are mighty fighters, to be sure. No one with this world will gainsay that they have proven that many times over, but they have other gifts that the rest of us do not possess. Behind you is a bard, a skald, and his weapon is not first that sword he wears, rather the power he draws from that harp of his. Can any other of us touch its strings to such purpose? Divine, no warrior, but a healer, a worker of spells, one who can draw upon potent powers which or who will not answer to any other's voice. And you, yourself, Nail Fangtooth, all know the gifts of the werekind, both their powers and what trouble may follow the use of them. I am what I am. I have the spell that I used, and perhaps 1 or 2 others I can summon. However, I am no true daughter of such learning, rather one skilled to war. Yet again, I may have what each of the others of you lack, while you, she looked last to Milo, are a swordsman, a rank that marks you as a seasoned fighting man. Still, it is what you wear upon your thumb that guides us through this desert. So each of us having our own talent to offer, can we say that Gult does not also have his? Being what? Demanded Nail. So far we have had to cuddle him as if he were a babe. Would you now dose him with all our water so he may stumble on, say, another day or night's journey? What then? Having used up our supplies, he is no better, and we are the worse. I tell you, girl, battle maid or no, such an action is a foolishness that only the greenest of country lads, who has never borne the weight of a shield, might decide upon. However, she is right. Milo slewed around to front the berserker, knowing well that perhaps he might also face a disastrous flare-up of the big man's murderous temper. What Evilly had just said was logical good sense. Their very mixed party differed from any questing company could remember, so diversified that there must be some reasons for its assembly. Certainly, Gult had contributed nothing so far but the weight of a burden, but he did wear the bracelet, so it followed he had his place in the venture. For a moment the swordsman thought that Nail would vent his anger. Milo was sure that he could never stand up to a berserker's attack. Then there came a ripple of notes. Milo, his own blood pounding evilly in his ears, was confused. A beard here, in this death wilderness? He saw the flush subside in Nail's face, felt his own hand fall away from his sword hilt. Then he realized that Wymark was smiling. His fingers on the heartstrings made them sing once more. Nail looked at the bard. You play with magic, songsmith, and sometimes you may find those fingers of yours burned. But there was no real threat behind his warning. It was as if the music had drawn the poison of anger out of him as speedily as a sword could let the life out of any man. My magic, berserker, returned Wymark. We may not be blood comrades, but the battle maid has the right of it. Deserve it or not, we are bound fast together in this ploy. Therefore, I have one small suggestion to offer. This Afrit of yours, if she is like all her kind, she can smell out of both food and drink. Suppose you lose her, berserker. In the meantime, if our skilled fellow here needs water to keep life within that long body of his, I say give him of my share. I have often tramped the roads where wells lay far apart. Divdine looked up from his beads. Give of mine also, daughter. He pushed the skin he had borne closer to her. The elf said nothing, only brought his skin, while Milo tugged at the stopper on his. For a long moment Nail hesitated. A snake's skin, he growled, struck my shield mate's head from his shoulders. On that day I took oath, as I laid Carl under his stones of honor, that I would have vengeance for his blood price. That was 3 seasons ago, and in a far part of the world. But if you all agree to this folly, I shall not be lessened by you. As for Afrita, he raised his hand to his throat, and the pseudo-dragon crawled out to sit upon it. I think she will find us nothing beyond what we see here and now, but I cannot answer for her. She shall do that for herself. He loosed his small flyer into the night. Divdine, the girl, and Milo worked together, laving the skin of guilt until the lizardman cowed. His eyes, dull and nearly covered by the extra inner lid, opened. They could not wet down his cloak again. That would have taken all the water of a small pond, Milo imagined. Perhaps though, with it about him, the moisture on his skin would not evaporate so soon. At least the burning sun was gone. As they freed the cloaks they had used to roof their day shelter, the swordsman looked to his ring. To his great surprise, fortune at last favored them a little, for, even in the dark, a spark of light shone there on what they hoped was their path. Divdine stepped up beside Guild, pulling one of the lizardman's dangling arms about his own shoulders, lending him part of his own strength. The rest shrugged on their pucks. Nail without a word, slinging the clerics along with his own. There were a few stars, high and cold, very remote, but not tonight no moon. Still the dust itself seemed oddly visible, though Milo could discern no real radiance out of it, merely that it stretched as a pallid field ahead. They wobbled and fought for balance until their hatching muscles perforce adjusted to a gait necessary to maintain them afoot. At least the blowing of dust powder which had accompanied them during their half-day's travel appeared to have died away. Their surroundings were clear enough of the punishing haze for them to breathe more easily and see to a greater distance. Milo moved out, his attention ever divided between the ring and the way ahead, for they had to the tower from time to time to avoid the rise of dunes. They had halted twice for rest, before Afrita's hissing call brought them to a quick third pause. The pseudo-dragon sped directly to Nail, hooked close in the folded back hood of his cloak, and pressed her snout as close to his helm, concealed her ear as she could get. That way, Nail gestured with his hand to the right. She has made a find. He stepped out of the line of their advance, apparently quite confident of Afrita's report. Because the others had some hope in that confidence, they fell on him behind him. Weaving a way through a miniature range of dust hills, they came out into a wide open expanse. From its nearly flat surface jutted upward 2 tall, thin columns, starkly dark against the pallid sand. Afrita took wing once more, hissing loudly. She reached the nearest of those pillars and clung with taloned feet, her head pointing downward to the smooth dust. Her hissing became a squawk of excitement. Milo and Nail floundered on until the berserker set hand to the pillar below the perch of his winged companion. Wood! Wood! Now he pounded on it. 1 second. You know what this is? I have seen service aboard the 3 ships of part. This is a mast. There is a ship below it. He dropped to his knees, scooping away dust with his cupped hands, sending its powder flying over his shoulder as a hound might dig at the burrow of prey gone to earth. But Milo moved away from the flying dust that swirled out from the berserker sessions. A barrier ship, what might that still bold after all these years? Anything, Ingrid's voice was calm, yet it would appear he was infected with the madness that had gripped the berserker, only with a little more logic in his action. For before he squatted down a short distance away. He had drawn off one of his dust shoes and was using it as a shovel, doing greater good with that than Nail had been able to accomplish with his hands. Milo was certain some madness bomb of this alien and threatening world, perhaps even an outreaching of that which they saw and which must have defenses they could not conceive, had gripped both of them. Then Wymark moved closer and deliberately knelt to unfasten his own webbed footgear. He glanced up at Milo, his dust-begrimed face showing that lazy smile. Do not think they have taken leave of all senses, swordsman. Any ship that breasted such a sea as this must have gone well provisioned. And do not underrate our winged friend there. If she was told to seek water, that was what she quested for, nor would she make a mistake. It seems that perhaps miracles may yet be with us, even in these unregenerate and decadent days. With that, he too began to dig. Though Milo could not really accept that they would find anything, he discovered that he could not keep apart from their labor. So save for Guilt, who lay on the dust well away from the scene of their efforts, they united to seek a ship that might have lain cradled in the dust since before one stone of grey oak's wall had been set upon another. It was a black killing, a deserting task, for the dust shifted continually through their improvised shovels, and though they mounted it as far away from where they dug as they could, streams of dust continually trickled down the sides of the hole to be lifted out again. They tried to steady these walls with the fabric of their cloaks, but Milo believed they were wasting their strength in fully. Then Nail gave a shout, mighty enough to move the dunes themselves. The king! Long ago Divdine had produced this light, giving globe to aid their sight, and now he swung it below. It was true enough. What Milo had never really expected to see was firm under the berserker's boots, a stretch of planking. Afrita fluttered down from her perch on the mast and landed on a ridge of yet uncleared dust. There she began to scrabble with her feet, again uttering her high squawk. Nail pursed his lips, hissed in turn. The pseudo-dragon fluttered up, keeping her wings aware while Light scooped vigorously at the site she had indicated. Within moments his whips had uncovered what could only be the edge of a hatch. At the same moment, Milo looked down at his wrist. His bracelet had come to life. "Where the dice?" he cried out as he strove to concentrate with all the energy his tired body could summon on the beginning wear of those warnings of danger. He did not even know if his warning had reached the others. Heat warmed the metal as the points of light glinted. On his mind he urged, I repeat. His heat warmed the metal as the points of light glinted. On, his mind urged. On, give me. The dice stopped, allowing their patterned blades just for a moment before they were dead. metal and jammed together again. Milo snatched up the shield he had been using to carry off the upthrown dust from the edge of the pit they were digging. His sword was already drawn as he swung slowly about, searching for an enemy he was sure must exist. He saw Gould throw off the heavy cloak, pulling himself to his knees, his hand fumbling weakly at the hilt of his own quartz-studded weapon. Evilly dumping a burden of dust from her own shield, scrambled to her feet and sunk calf-deep in the loose ground. For the first time, Milo thought of this impediment to any battle. To fight on their dust shoes would make even the most dexterous of swordsmen unsteady, unable to use even a fraction of his skill. To discard the webbing might plunge them instantly into a trap, keeping them fast pinned at the pleasure of the foe. Where was the enemy? The pale stretch of the dust above the pit and the hillocks of powdery stuff they had dumped at a distance were clearly vacant of any save themselves. Ingrid crawled up, made for his bow and the arrow quiver that he had left besides the depleted water skins. The elf's head swung from side to side, and though in this half-light Milo could not be sure, the swordsman believed Ingrid's nostrils expanded and contracted, testing the air for a scent human senses were too dulled to discover. Divine was the next to crawl into sight. He must have left its light globe below in the pit. Though his prayer bat swung from his left wrist, now he stopped a foot or so away from the edge of their pit to gather up a fistful of dust chanting. He tossed this into the air, pivoted slowly, throwing similar handsful to each point of the compass as he used one of the archaic tongues of the temple trained. What he strove to do, Milo could not guess, but as far as he himself could gauge it, the spell achieved nothing. Eve, man, I have the lashing cut. Nail's bellow sounded from below. Had the berserker not heard the warning or taken heed of his own bracelet, Milo, reluctant to leave his post above, shouted back. Where, Nail? Take watch yourself, roared the other. I have seen the dice spin, but what we must face lies. There was a crash. Dust rose out of the pit in a great billowing cloud to blind their eyes, fill their mouths and noses, render them for a long moment helpless. Then came another shout. Fast upon that the warning grunt of a battle-mad boar many times louder than any true boar could utter. Without clear talk of what might happen, Milo, still weeping at his watering eyes with the back of his left hand, swung around to wade toward the lip of the pit, for there was no mistaking the sounds now. Battle was in progress there. End of chapter 12. And end for today, on the climax. Next time we read chapter 13 and 14 and we continue our story. So it's the pair of interest chapter for today. We see Lucius the Golden Dragon and we start our journey into the Sea of Dust, one of the most particular location of Greyhawk, of the world of Greyhawk. The word of Greyhawk, its name is Hoert, if I remember well. So the Sea of Dust is one of the most particular locations of Hoert. Then next time we will see if our heroes escape death, what they fighting for, what if they maybe reach their objective. Damn, I hate improvising. Damn. If they can win. that's all. If they can win against this unknown enemy. And what they are fighting in this moment in the Sea of Dust under an ancient ship, we discover it next time. For today is all. Then have a nice evening or a nice day or a nice night, and goodbye. Till the next time. Ciao. No.